So exciting to have a chat with you, mate, and to be here today. I think this is one that I find quite special because I've had the opportunity to see your business grow and to get an insight into your business. But today we are joined by Jacob from SAYFE, who has created an amazing system which looks at the disclosure process and the things that are broken about the disclosure process. And I'll get you to do an intro because I won't cover the key bits for yourself and for your business. But I want to highlight today we'll be discussing harm. We'll be discussing things that are quite common for us to discuss. If any of those sorts of things are triggers for you or are things that you are uncomfortable or unsafe about, maybe don't listen to this episode because it will discuss assault and violence and the kind of pointy end of disclosure. But if you can keep yourself safe and listen to it, it will be a really important episode, and we will include support links and things in the description as we normally do. So I'm very excited to welcome Jacob. Jacob, could you tell us a bit about who you are?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about this space. It is one that is, I guess, it lives in public consciousness somewhere, but we really avoid getting down into the nitty gritty, and we put it as it's easy, I should say, to put it as out of sight, out of mind, particularly as blokes. It's something that, yeah, you might say you care about it, but if you were to empathize and put yourself in the shoes of a woman, where the statistics say between 1 in 4, 1 in 5 women over the age of 15 will have experienced some form of sexual violence, it's quite shocking that we don't talk about it more. I guess the origin of my deep dive into the space and wanting to do more to be part of this conversation comes from having spent over a decade in Victoria Police, where I spent the majority of my career as a victim centric investigator, so a detective who specialised in domestic, family, and sexual violence. And the, I guess, the moment the needle moved for me in terms of really discovering that the system was broken. Well, yeah, I guess you can take one look at statistics and get a grasp of that. Whether that's the statistics of an underwhelming success rate through the judicial process, but for me, the one that was the tipping point was when I was on my specialist course into sexual offences and child abuse investigation. I was presented with the statistic that 87% of sexual assaults go unreported. And more concerning than that is I went through that course in 2019, 2020, and it's now 2025, and that statistic has gone up. So it's now sitting at, according to the Australian Law Reform Commission's Justice Response to Sexual Violence report, the statistic is now sitting at closer to 92%. And I sat there, and what I had to wrestle with was not only the jarring nature of the statistic itself, but the manner in which it was, I guess, pragmatically presented is what they would say. And while I understand that motivation, I guess I'm just not. I'm probably less of a pragmatic person and more of a big picture. We need to do more, kind of thinker. And but so it was just that complacency piece with, oh, well, we'll just do the best with the 13% of reports that we do get, or back to that now, the 8% of reports we do get, which for me is just unfathomable. And I'm like, no, we've got to be doing more. And that was sort of the start of this journey into exploring how do we make things better. So we went about identifying that there are six major barriers that prevent the reporting of sexual violence. Some of the headline ones being fear of not being believed, fear of the legal processes, and social phobia. So that the actual act of expressing what's happened to you to somebody in a position of authority. Those are really big mountains to climb. So we went about thinking about the fact that it's 2025 and we've got more tech at our fingertips than ever before. So how can we build some that helps us break through these walls that I guess society up until present even hasn't done a great job of knocking down before. So that's where SAYFE came into it. Long story short, I've given you the long background, so I'll give you the long story short of what the actual solution is. But it's an anonymous disclosure portal, a digital solution to which allows people to make their disclosures anonymously through the use of an unique reference number, which a person making a disclosure can keep with them at all times. If they have to leave or if they're not comfortable continuing but want to return at a later date, they can use that unique reference number to return. And rather than having to re traumatize themselves by repeating everything, their previous disclosure will have loaded. So whoever is at the other end of the portal can pick up where they left off. That's a major fact as well, making sure that somebody doesn't have to keep reliving that experience. And importantly, in that is the anonymity facet, which forever and a day has been believed to be impossible in the reporting process of a sexual crime. And to a degree, it's a truth, but that comes into the formal reporting side of the equation. So technically speaking, you can't proceed through a criminal prosecution without a victim being attached to to a sexual crime. So while there does need to be uh, an identity attached to a formal report, what this does is it allows somebody to go through the disclosure and explain to a professional what happened to them under the guise of anonymity, and get a very clear explanation at the end of that disclosure, what we would call the options talk, which outlines, based on what you've outlined to me today, we can identify that an offence has taken place. This is what you could reasonably expect would happen from here if you were to proceed with a formal report, and then give that opportunity so that person has an informed insight into their sense of agency of whether or not they wish to report formally. And they may not. One of the important things about our solution is that we also attach it to welfare services. So this might just be an anonymous entry point to engage in those welfare services, because people, just as much of a concern is, there are so many people who have survived sexual violence who have avoided getting the support, whether that be physical or psychologically speaking, who have avoided seeking out that support because they fear that there's going to be a mandatory disclosure by whoever they seek support from. So what we do is we allow that anonymity to create an entry point to the referral and welfare and well-being services at the other side. So one of the big things, like Cam and I, we went through the Polish Innovators course together, and we had the opportunity to, speak to a number of experts. And one of the big takeaways for me in that was, and it challenged my perception as coming into this with probably a law enforcement hat on, of how do we increase reporting and pathways into the judicial system. I was just sort of asked, between, like, hit me between the eyes, like, what is success for somebody going through this process? And it probably was the first time that I really sat there and thought, well, maybe success for everyone isn't necessarily that it transitions into a successful prosecution journey. It might just be that taking the weight off somebody's shoulders who's been carrying this alone for so long because they haven't known how to take that step of telling someone. Or maybe it's the success is that they're engaged with wellbeing services. It might have nothing to do with the judicial process at all, but for that individual person, they got what they needed out of it. So, yeah, I think you asked me a 5-second question, and I've given you a close to, if we check the time, what is it, a 9-minute answer? So, yeah, that's an insight, and I probably haven't said much.
No, no, I think that you've hit on like some really, really important areas, and I think that it is important we give time to talk through the solution, because it's a very complex area that needs simple and direct solves.
Yes.
Like, and it's something that, like, I look at this and go, I will acknowledge that it's two blokes talking about an issue that predominantly affects
Yeah.
women, but doesn't only affect women, and so suddenly you need different solutions in different areas as well. But I will highlight that, and like I invite anyone into the conversation of the perspectives we can't bring. But even on when I look at some of these areas and I think about it in like a work, even a workplace context, and the people that require disclosure to access support systems sometimes, which is something we discourage.
Mm.
Um, so there are some companies that require you to disclose if you're experiencing like family, domestic, or sexual violence to access the leave provision. But that in itself is probably a reason why only 20% of people experiencing access to leave. And I really love to pick your brains in particular on the this process of where in the I think of the like workplace support systems and going, oh, it seems like to me every workplace should have this as part of their support suite. Like your EAP or your areas should include a hey, can I pre-check, particularly in this area, right, whether or not I can disclose, because it gives that power and agency back to the person who's had it taken away in a bit of that experience. But I'd love to know, like I guess you have such intimate knowledge of the thorny side of this process. When you look at places where things like SAYFE should sit, are there any key intersections for a workplace audience that you would look at?
Oh, absolutely. And so to give context to where I was at the point in my life where I first had the ideation of this solution, I was still very much in Victoria Police, and so I thought of the solution purely through the lens of how do I, as an investigator, get more, create greater, more efficient entry points to the system for the survivors that I'm working with. Because what I identified was, as a specialist investigator, the disclosures that reached me, I was often the fourth person in line that was getting a hold of this information, and I was, in terms of working with the survivor, I was probably the most important person to them in terms of my role moving forward. But in reality, the most important person is should be that person that they first speak to, because that's the person that's got this big responsibility. So I say that purely to identify when I first had the idea, it was purely through a law enforcement lens. Then, you go through the reality of, developing a business dedicated to getting this solution off the ground, because the issue I ran into trying to pitch this within a policing organization was, oh, what a great idea, attaboy. Uh, Good on you for thinking outside the box. So it became, I wanted to give this idea to them and have them run with it. I didn't have, like, it wasn't my idea to create a business, or did I have any idea that this was going to be the future that I was going to go into. It just seemed like a logical solution for me. Anyway, fast forward to where, this is my this is my focus, this is my passion, this is what I'm doing. You do look at the realities of scalability and where can this solution plug into, and it uh, very quickly, if you just replace who the experts are on the other end of the portal, it really can plug into any environment, because it is that, if you broke it down to nothing else, it's the fact that it doesn't have to be face to face, it doesn't have to be spoken word, it can be a a communication medium essentially of the user's choice, but facilitating a communication with an expert that is at the other end of the portal, who doesn't know who you are. So if you cut everything away and take sexual violence out of it, that solution should plug into any space where somebody might be in a vulnerable position where they need to have certain assurances in place before they put their name to something, or if they need that sense of protection uh, in their solution. And I can speak to, so Cam, as you know, my exit from Victoria Police was due to ill health, mental health injury, um, and I can freely, and this is why I love the work that you and the team are doing at Capyble so much, is purely because I think, and we've spoken about this before, so many workplaces seem to have that tick box culture. of let's put let's put all the buzzwords in place that say speak up, where that's what courage now is, speaking up and doing all that stuff. And, it's a little bit like, and one of the things I really admire about a charity like Are You Okay? When they first started, it was Are You Okay Day. And over the last couple of years, they've realized it's okay, that bit we've ticked, like we've got people asking that question and we've got people coming forward. We need to start teaching, what do we do when somebody says no? And so while they as a charity, just as a side example, as a reference point, have pivoted really well, for me, my experiences of when I spoke up about my deteriorating mental health in Victoria Police was really, really poor. And I maintain to this day that if that response was better, um, that I would still be in. And it was a complicated journey to why I had mental health issues. There was actually an intersection with um, family violence. I was a whistleblower on behalf of somebody else, and it was complicated because that person was employed by Victoria Police. So, should be the bread and butter as a team. And the response was really poor. So this is an organisation that you would expect to nail these issues. But when it's internal, you'll find that, the workplaces that are the best at, or for some people, would be seen as being the best external response, are the worst at handling it when when it emanates inside. So a solution like SAFE, if you can provide that bridge be, bridge to getting an idea of exactly what you're getting yourself into by speaking up on an issue before you commit to speaking up on an issue, is really important. Because for me, I dipped further as a result of being in that disclosure system. Like, things got worse for me. So,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think about that, like the journey of a lot of survivors that we talk to, particularly like LGBTQ plus survivors, like the small drops along the way where, like one might, if it's a male incident, one might be sent to the perpetrator's line when he's actually looking for victim survivor support. Those little, like, one-off incidents and slip-ups that keep compounding because systems are designed for the a scale of a problem that we just can't deal with right now.
yeah,
We need more solutions. That's why we get support and do what we do, because like I think of, like, when you were talking about the statistics of, like, even acknowledgement that someone's experienced, and then disclosure, and then safety. It's the same when we talk to workplaces about their data and they go, "Oh, we've got no LGBTQ plus employees, or we've got no cold employees, or culturally and linguistically diverse employees." And you go, "Do you, or do you not have an environment where people are safe to report that?" And therefore, can we trust your data that you're making decisions for systems based on, to then make systems that make people safe enough to give you trustworthy data? And I see that a lot when I think about this disclosure process. I'd love to think about, like, what would a redesigned system look like for anyone in a workplace who might be experiencing sexual violence. Like, the how do we replace that trauma system, like the traumatic system of disclosure, where they have to tell a whole bunch of people and they have to go through these hoops even to just access leave or access support or access EAP or access police, like take time off to go and see police or go to the courts, and then have to tell their colleagues why they're not at work that day. I love, like, it's probably hard to think of as a concept, but, like, are there key pillars that you look to, or things that you look to in your system design, that you would encourage other people to pull from, like, your lived experience of trying to navigate a system that didn't support you?
yeah. I guess I mean, I remember I've had a chat with Mix previously, and if I took my hat off as obviously a tech founder who's trying to put a position in here, who's trying to give value to the benefits of putting a tech solution in. I think I often feel like a responsibility to state that as I sort of alluded to before, when I first had this idea, it was purely about the solution getting to the end user. So my motivation has never been that scalable profitability of it. So I'm really invested in the end result for the beneficiary. So I still think uh, I still think of we could fix so much with by stripping everything back and acknowledging as organizations that we need to do things a hell of a lot better and stop trying to, you know, a lot's focused on the band-aid fixes, the patch jobs, the seal is no more gaps. And so I'm super cognizant that so much more could be achieved if we just had a willingness to acknowledge that we're not doing things tremendously well. And I honestly think that would bring so much, like, regardless of the industry, whether it's a politician standing up in front of us trying to tell us, well, I suppose a trivial example that's not going, that's that I is a trivial enough issue to not be untoward by making a joke out of it is we had got major pothole issues in Victoria at the moment, and people have been calling, radio stations to talk about, oh, what is the government going to do about this issue, and instead of just as the government standing up and saying, yeah, you know what, we're gonna have to do more. They got up and said, I drove on that road a couple of weeks ago and there were no potholes. Was a real and I tell that story because while we can laugh at that example, those are real answers being provided to more serious themes as well. Another example, I know you and I have been talking about safety in rideshare industries, and one of the big ones I will say, one of the big ones that isn't DD, because I I think DD are motivated to be doing the right thing at the moment, and I commend them. So read into that what you will. But um, there was an article in the New York Times where the representative from Uber was being asked a direct question about how are you addressing the reported instances of sexual violence, whether that be harassment or assault in your rideshare services. And a real answer to a New York Times reporter was, well, we haven't validated how many of those reports were true. We don't know that they weren't false reports from people trying to get free rides. So, again, is how about we just acknowledge, like, it would be so easy to say it's abhorrent that we have such high reporting numbers and we need to tear this whole thing back and think about how we rebuild. Stop thinking about the patch jobs, start thinking about taking it all back and building from the ground up. Obviously not to a level that your business can't run, but there is so much. So if I now give you the 15-second answer to to this long winding answer, which you've known me long enough now to know that I tend to veer into tangents, but just so much can be achieved by acknowledging the issue and not patronizing the audience of the discussion. Acknowledge that this is real and we need to do better. You're going to earn so much more respect from that than you will saying this isn't an issue. So
Look, I think the biggest thing on that is that, like, there's a. It's not that you're saying we in particular are really bad at this. Everyone is really bad at
yeah,
it. Like, it is. It is a collective. I think there's a lot of fear and people feel overwhelmed in leadership positions because there's so many things to do all the time, right?
yeah,
But that doesn't mean that you can't just go, look. Every business is struggling with this because so many of our population are affected by this issue, and we can identify the systems we can control to do better at this. And it is terrible that this happens and has happened under our watch. If you're, in that case, here is what we can try and do to be better than the average. And if everyone took that approach, then it's you against the problem as well. Like,
yeah,
I find I get this in men's groups, or the other day I had a incident with my barber, shall we say, where I was chatting to him about, like, there's this big problem where young boys, they open up any social media app and they get fire hosed Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes and men saying, your body, my choice, all this sexist crap,
Yeah.
and all this entitled, you know, um, crap to about women's bodies and women's experiences. And he was like, "Oh yeah, but like a lot of young men feel isolated and alone, and Andrew Tate says a lot of stuff that helps with that." And I was kind of like, "Okay, it might help now, but also maybe the isolation of young men is not the same issue as this, and we are bad at isolating young men, and we are bad at the experience of women. And maybe if we didn't bring the two together
Yeah.
and looked at this as the links between the issues, 100% isolated young men use violence, and you know, and the same as we look at ACEs and all that sort of stuff, and you like the. But when I look at these systems, I'm like, okay, we can directly attack these issues without making one suffer as the result. I think they are linked, but like the
Yeah.
one group doesn't need to suffer, so the other one experiences violence. I
Yeah.
think is the um, and I think about that when I look at like all of the cyber safety and the online harassment and the intersections of our work. And like, so I love talking to you about like we have to do point in time solutions, but we can own the fact that we as a society are not great at this, and men in particular are not great at this, and we haven't been for thousands of years.
Yeah.
This is the we got access to tech and education and all this wonderful stuff now. We can do better
Yeah.
with less resources.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on a couple of things. We accept, like, well, sorry, reasonable people accept that these are widespread issues, as you completely allude to. Nobody's so an acknowledgement that you have been systemically a part of the problem isn't saying, "Oh my god, look at that." That's not going to be the response. That's what be. It is a good business model to be seen as a leader in the response fighting back, not to be part of the crowd denying your participation in it. We want to see people making those meaningful responses. And further to your point about how you know, you go down that pipeline of the flow on effects. Like, as a society, as men, again, we get far too obsessed with creating the not all men narrative rather than proving I'm not that man. Do that. Show why you're not. Don't tell us not all men, because for one, no one said that to begin with. They use the collective they use the collective term to summarize more than one man. And if it's not all men, it's too many men. So stop telling us that it's not all of you, because if you see a commentary about men's violence, which is completely backed up by statistics, and you take that as an accusation, that's something that requires introspection. That is not something that needs to be addressed by the commentator. So you hit the nail for sure.
Hmm. Oh, the amount of people that tell on themselves in their own, and look, I will say like it's not. I'm not trying to have a go at them. Like I can see the fear and the stigma and the like the overwhelm of you can't really see the word masculinity without seeing the word toxic, which depends on if you want to identify as mask and you care about what that means. It's a whole we could spend hours chatting about that. I think that I actually wanted to bring it back to for us in the end, and it's one of the bits that I'd love to highlight with you is there's many parts of this chain that are broken, many parts of the system. When we look at disclosure and workplaces, if someone is feeling overwhelmed, if I am one of these people who is in charge of small medium business or a workplace that could implement something, do you have like a first place that you go to check, or a first step that helps to rebuild that safety and trust, or a first thing that you look at in this system that they might have control over?
And I can't recall these studies off the top of my head, so I'm going to speak about the theme in very general general terms. But essentially, what I would point to is there are clear statistics around a satisfied, safe, and happy workplace having far greater productivity rates than a workplace that doesn't meet those satisfaction regulations. Granted, this isn't my area of expertise, but I've seen enough of these statistics to be aware, and I've worked in enough workplaces to know that that is really true. You will get the best out of somebody. They'll be working. So you look at the hours in a day, and what is more important in that 8 hours, that you have somebody who, or let's roll it into an 80-hour fortnight. If you've got somebody who's a shell of themselves because of issues that are beyond their control, but they have the fear of seeking the support of the workplace because it's going to open themselves up to a vulnerability, or or a perception exists that they won't be met with support, because we do live in a world where perception is reality. Um, and unless you're giving them a reason not to perceive the landscape that way, that's not going to change. So if you want, if you're an employer who's worried about productivity and somebody, because and there will be employers out there that are looking at the bottom line of, oh, if they take me up on that 2 days in a fortnight, I'm losing 16 hours. But if you compare 64 hours of a happy, healthy person at their desk, and look at their success rates and what their actual productivity was, versus a frail shell of themselves who's there for 80 hours, I almost guarantee you the person who spent less time at their desk is going to have moved the needle further for what your company's goal is. So if you create an environment where people are happy to come to work, they are only going to utilize their entitlements if they feel happy and safe in their workplace and they're going to be treated well. If you don't have those satisfaction rates, that's not a happy, healthy workplace. So yeah, if looking at how many keystrokes they're doing, or making sure that their mouse is moving every 5 minutes, and that's your metric of how much engagement you're getting out of your employees, then bloody double thumbs up to you. But I'm tipping you're not paying somebody just to sit at their desk. So if you want to get the best out of your people, make them feel safe. Make them feel that that 8 hours in that day is the place that they can come and be themselves, and you will get the best out of that person.
I think a lot about employee loyalty as a thing. Like the basic people are saying millennials or younger, they don't stay at a company more than a year or two now. That there's no stay with a company until you retire mentality in people anymore
Yeah,
at all. It's not. There's no loyalty back. Like there's the people. But if you wanted your employees to be there for the long term, it's how you handle incidents like this that go to employee loyalty and joy and happiness more than anything else, right? I think of the company that I worked for years and years ago that, I'll leave out of it because of the incident
yeah,
where, someone sent a person in a position of power sent a dick pic to an intern. Everybody knew about it.
yeah,
That person stayed there and the intern disappeared. The lack of joy, the lack of trust, the erosion that the handling of that incident led to, compared to workplaces that I've seen that have said, we are around this person needs support, they will disclose what they can about the situation or what they are willing to. But seeing that trust and anyone and people going, anyone can access this, we support you, we've got you, that is someone who will work for you or with you and want to be there, and everyone around them will be affected by that as well, and
yeah.
you'll have systems of trust. We won't even know what's happened to that person 99% of the time, but you will see the difference that support and that leadership brings, compared to this person might. I see it in DV leave all the time, where they're like, oh, someone will just use this as another way to get paid leave off, like sick days, and I kind of like, I,
If that's where
yeah,
your head's going at the start of that conversation, then we know what type of workplace we're talking about.
yeah, and I think this is one of the things that even if let's say no one ever used it,
Yeah,
if you knew that the system existed, if you knew why it existed and that your workplace cared that it existed, and no one ever needed to use it, it would be the best investment for like ROI dollar for dollar
yeah.
than some of the other things that you probably like than going
Monthly
and planting
pizza
trees
day.
for a day. Yeah, that's it.
That's been known to get morale going.
Yeah,
Extra
if I
topping.
knew that that commitment was there from a workplace,
Yeah.
that would be such a difference compared to yeah.
No, I think you hit the nail on something important that an attitude that I've sort of developed over the years is like people will talk about, we talk about respect as an issue, and we have historically seen respect as a top down thing, but respect has to be going both directions, and you need to drop people. I will die on this hill. People need to drop the obsession that somebody has to earn your respect. I'm a massive advocate, particularly within an organization. Like, obviously there are exceptions to people you don't know, and there's trust issues. But within an organization, let's leave it at that. Give everyone your respect, and people have to lose your respect. Because if you start with nobody has my respect and you have to earn it, you're already started. You've established the power imbalance immediately. So make respect go up and down. Give your respect to everybody. And if somebody does something to lose it, then yeah, go through your accountability practices and whatever. But on the same token, in terms of loyalty, gone are the days where loyalty is something that you can demand. Loyalty, to the flip side of respect, is something that you have to earn as somebody at the top of the hierarchy. You will earn loyalty by the way you make your people feel rather than what you tell them they owe to you. This is something that it's 100% been uh, something I've gone full circle on, being part of a paramilitary rank driven structure, which is very much a top down world. So I've definitely come a long way in what my previous outlook on these themes were, and I fear any workplace that tells you on day one that we're family. I that doesn't sit well with me at all, and I pair that with saying that's not to say that a workplace can't go on to make you feel like you're part of a family in the traditional sense. Because what I've like, and maybe I'm overly pessimistic, but somebody that feels the need to tell you, no, you're in a family now. And maybe this is perhaps open to interpretation, but the way I see that now is if you have to tell people that on day one, it's probably less about we're family because we all support each other, and more we're a family. So when we treat you like crap, we expect you to let us get away with more than you'd let anybody else, because that's what we do with family, right? We let family probably push us to a point that we wouldn't let anybody else. But so maybe overly pessimistic from me there, but I long long story short again, and I'm making a habit of saying that, but all of the things that you want to stand for as an organization, don't they can't be announcements on day one. They need to be something that you seek to earn every day.
And I think that's actually a really good way. I'd use this to bring it back together to the beginning of our discussion and your solution in particular, because if I was to take anything away from learning your work and what you're building, but also this chat, um, these are ways like the systems for people who experience, particularly when it comes to sexual violence, are demeaning, and there's not a lot of respect and integrity that they can feel in that, because it's a really difficult, the multiple disclosures, all of the current processes, and it's something that I love about your work, and I find analogous to the work when I look at e-learning, because current e-learning, if you're trying to tick a box, is not respectful to the learner. It's
No,
respectful to the organization's
yeah,
needs, but it's not respectful to the person learning. It's a skills assessment.
yeah,
So in both of those cases, I think the thing that I love in particular about SAFE is that it's trying to give ownership, but a bit of like respect and integrity to the person in there much as you can in that experience. And I think if that's something that I would sum up from our chat today, or bring to a key point for me, is that if you can give someone the agency and the ability that they need to at least have a little more control over what happens with their story and their experience and make that choice, that is really powerful. Whether it's, a workplace system, something like disclosing sexual violence, or what happens after that disclosure in your workplace for that person to get back to work and to get back to, this the area that they were in before that happened, or it should be a new wonderful built life from that they can help others with, the resilience and all those sorts of wonderful things we can talk about another time with people who go through these systems. I think I'd put my hat off to you and say, like, I really admire that approach, and it's something that I would borrow in future and take as my little like wrap up takeaway, and also say thank you so much for coming on
no,
and having a chat and
yeah,
a ramble.
no. Thank you. I think that's the amazing thing about what you guys are doing. Like I've said previously, I've seen firsthand systems that fall short, and knowing that there is an organization like yours that is striving to not only, you're not just an organization that's trying to lead by doing it well yourselves internally. You're an organization that exists to give tools to other organizations to do it better. So the more people that know that you exist, the better. And the other thing that I love about the fact that you're engaging in conversations with me and many others shows that you are constantly trying to co-design everything that you do. You're not in any danger of being within an echo chamber of you and Mix just going, "Hey, this great idea, let's do that." There is layers to where you get your input from to form your next approach, and I think those are the organizations, the ones that know that outside voices aren't something that slows a process down, or it's certainly not a negative. It's the it's just care, and that's what I think. That's what we're all in this for, because we care about the beneficiaries, and we're both in organizations where as far as a business model goes, our beneficiaries aren't our customers. So it's a really interesting nuance to find, where we're building solutions to benefit people who will never be the ones that are on the hook for it. So there's an art to this. How do you tell organizations that you need to do this for your people? And I think it's a space that you're navigating really well. So, as you know, big fans of the work you and Mix are doing, and yeah, tremendous pleasure to be given a platform by you to talk about the space.
And absolutely a massive fan of. I think that's the thing about we want to co-design. I invite people to tell us that we're wrong, or to give us their opinions, but also to, like, if there are things we can add to this conversation. If you want to have a chat to follow up, I always do this as a wrap up when we're doing things of please help us to learn, grow, discover. But also, I want to give a big thank you to you. I want people to look up SAFE and to look at how they might apply it in their workplaces, because I think it is a key part of not only the systems that you're trying to change external to a traditional workplace, but I think this should be core to your support bundle in any workplace. And I'd also encourage people to look out for the Polished Innovators and the Polished Man Group, and all the people that have supported people like Jacob and us to get where we are. Because if it wasn't for people like YGAP giving us that program, and if it wasn't for the support to have broader conversations like this, then I don't think we would see that really thoughtful sector that's come to give us time to do it. So I want to thank you. I want to encourage people to check out your work, but I also want to encourage people to jump into the conversation. And thank you so much for your time. I hope you get some time back later today.
thank, thank you very much. Absolute pleasure.